Money emerged as a medium of exchange for the production and distribution of goods and services. However, after the Nik슨쇼크 in 1971, the dollar lost its connection with gold as the United States began printing large amounts of dollars. Its growth rate increased several times faster than world GDP, which is the production of goods and services. This created the essential problem of financial capitalism. Gold is a currency that mankind has used for thousands of years. But at some point, paper money replaced gold. The biggest reason why paper currency was able to be trusted is because it was distributed based on the gold standard supported by gold. The gold standard is a method in which the government holds large amounts of gold, issues paper currency equal to the value of the gold held, and exchange it for gold at any time to those who request it. This system made people trust paper money, which had no trust whatsoever. The US currency, the dollar, also began based on the gold standard. The Brexit conference held in January 1944 at the end of World War II, which lasted 6 years from 1939 to 1945, was the starting point for the dollar as the reserve currency. In 1944, as the Allied victory in the World War II became clear, the United States worried about the aftermath of the war. So, in order to create a new world financial order, after 700 representatives from 44 countries gathered at Brexit in the United States to discuss the aftermath of the war. Previously, some countries, including the UK, had implemented the gold standard system. However, as the economy collapsed due to the Great Depression after World War I and enormous funds were needed, gold reserve gradually decreased. As World War II progressed, European countries paid for American supplies in gold, and the defeated countries also paid for reparations in gold. So gold disappeared from most countries. For this reason, the United States, which was the victor at the end of the war, became gold rich, holding 70% of the world's gold. So by the end of World War II, the gold standard had virtually completely collapsed in European countries. The key to maintain the gold standard is called convertibility, which converts paper currency into gold. But unfortunately, gold was only available in the United States, so the gold standard of the new Brexit system was centered on the United States. The rest of the world had to print huge amounts of money to repair the damage caused by the war, but there was actually no gold. So a lot of countries' currencies were pegged to the US dollar, indirectly linking them to gold. A fixed exchange rate system was implemented to fix the currency exchange rate to the dollar. Instead, the dollar was exchangeable for 1 ounce of gold for $35. The United States, which holds 70% of the world's gold, indirectly guaranteed the paper currency of each country that lacked credit. The fatal weakness of the dollar, which became the world's only reserve currency and ruled the world under the gold standard for about 30 years from 1944 to 1971, is that issuing too little of the dollar, which is the reserve currency, is a problem as well as issuing too much. So it is ultimately fixed. It was predicted that the exchange rate system would collapse. In the real world, US President Trump and Biden issued enormous amounts of dollars to stimulate the sleeping US economy during the COVID-19 period. In 1971, in the aftermath of the ongoing Vietnam War, the United States began pouring astronomical amounts of money into war expense. The United States eventually began printing more dollars than the amounts of gold it held. In this situation, confidence in the dollar in major European countries plummeted. Eventually, Switzerland, France, Spain, and the United States Kingdom began asking the United States to exchange dollars for gold, but America's gold was running out. If all the demand of European countries were met, the United States would have to hand over most of its gold holdings to other countries. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon appeared on TV and instructed the Secretary of the Treasury to stop exchanging dollars for gold. As a result, the Brexit system and the fixed exchange rate system that had been maintained for 30 years disappeared into history. The dollar weakened and major European countries and Japan, which held large amounts of dollars, suffered large losses due to the decline in dollar value. However, the United States was freed from the restrictions of gold and was now able to print dollars to its heart's content. Finally, the era of credit currency has arrived, in which currency is circulated solely on national credit. Since the 1970s, the growth rate of global financial assets began to significantly outpace the global economic growth rate. While the global economic growth rate was 3 to 4% per year, the growth rate of global financial assets averaged around 15%, 3 to 4 times that amount. Distribution to workers began to lag significantly behind productivity improvements after 1972. As a result, income inequality has deepened and wealth concentration, or the gap between rich and poor, has become extreme. By 1980, the size of the global financial assets had more than doubled. It has begun to surpass the size of the world's gross product. In other words, the capital intensity financial debt, which is financial assets divided by GDP, was 109%, or 1.09 times. Afterwards, neoliberalism and tax cut policies, represented by Reaganomics, began to gain popularity in the United States. The policy was to minimize government intervention and rely on market efficiency, and the goal was to revitalize the economy through active monetary policy, financial liberalization, and bold tax cut. Since then, the world's those who have increased rapidly.